Hello everyone, and thanks for the opportunity to speak with you today at the education event being held in northern Portugal. And a thank you to Vanya for tracking me down and asking whether I would mind sharing some thoughts around this topic of will schools even exist and be relevant in the future? And to share with you some insights from some research recently conducted around the class of 2030. What their expectations, their experiences, and their aspirations are. And if you'd like to sign up to receive a full copy of that research being released on the 24th of May, I've included a short URL on the screen, aka MS Class of 2030 sign up, and also my Twitter handle. Feel free to follow me to get updates and insights around education. So for those of you that don't know me, and hello to Vanya, hello to Nuno, and if Lewis from Frasio Cluster is there, a shout out to him. For those of you that don't know me, I work for Microsoft in headquarters in Redmond, Washington State, where I'm recording this just prior to heading to Munich. I have a background in education and a passion for it, with 25 years as a class teacher, as a school principal, designing and teaching at higher education levels, and then working for professional associations across Asia Pacific, Australia, and globally around education transformation, with a focus on how do we thoughtfully use digital to best improve the learning for the students, which is why I'm delighted to be here speaking to a group of passionate educators. And could I say thank you from us here at Microsoft Education for the work that you do each and every day. So I'd like to start off by just touching on the education transformation that we're living within at the moment. It's not a sense that it's on its way, it's already happened. Our first industrial revolution, if you like, used water and steam to mechanize production. The second industrial revolution used electricity and focused on mass production. The third industrial revolution made use of electricity, and it was used to automate production. And then, of course, we moved into the fourth industrial revolution, where we are at the moment, which we see building on the third. But it's a different sort of revolution. It's a different sort of digital revolution, if you like. The velocity, the scope, and the impact on systems globally are different. It's evolving exponentially, and it's disrupting every industry, including education. If you like, the fourth industrial revolution sees a fusion of technologies that blend the boundaries between physical, digital, and even biological worlds. And in this backdrop, we have a new cohort of students who are entering our school systems. Some people call them Generation Alpha, and some people refer to them as the phygital generation. So if you like, these students who don't necessarily draw a distinction between physical and digital worlds, they live in a blended reality. It's interesting to note that these students starting in our schools today will graduate into higher education and the world of work across the 2030s, which sounds a long way away, but when you consider it, it's only 12 years. They'll also be one of the generation of students who, by the time they're in grade 6, will probably find they're being taught by Generation Z, who are at the moment leaving formal school systems and entering university. And we know that by 2030, 75% of the workforce will be millennials. So this is interesting. We're going to have phygital students being taught probably by Generation Z, the first generation that, if you like, were born into a digital world. So it's really interesting when we think about schools, which are already complicated, multi-generational environments, to think about that mix of, Generation Alpha and Generation Z and the millennials and baby boomers still all operating and working together in one environment. So we've been engaged in lots of research, and certainly some of the things that we know across the globe is that learning has changed. So, you know, we know from evidence, if we look at John Hattie's meta-analysis of 250 different teaching approaches, we already know what teaching approaches make the biggest difference to learning. We know, published in 2018, that teacher efficacy was the number one contributing factor for improving learning. So the teacher's belief and sense of self-competence in their practice has an outstanding large impact on the learning of the students. We know that number two, to make a difference, is the student's ability to self-report accurately their own grades. So the research has shown, and it's thousands of pieces of research, that when young people are provided with the tools, the time, and the invitation, and can develop accuracy at being able to work out how well they're doing, how they learn best, what their preferred learning styles are able to set and monitor goals, are able to assess their own knowledge and skills, when that is a focus, their learning significantly improves. So these are interesting pieces of research that, as we develop products and solutions, we're constantly thinking, does this improve learning? Will this make a difference? These are the big questions people ask. We also know, obviously, and we've done extensive research in this space, that the workplace has changed, in a sense mirroring a lot of what we see happening in schools. Learning has become socially embedded. Learning is focused on competencies. We see in the workplace too a significant focus and some research coming up that I'll share in a moment, that as automation changes the workforce, many jobs will be removed, many jobs will be changed, and many jobs will be created. And what's interesting are the predictions around the types of skills and capabilities young people will need to be successful in this modern workplace. In the US, for example, by 2030, it's predicted 375 million people will change occupational categories alone. And also we see a massive increase in what's called the gig economy, people engaging in work which is short-term project-based work. So they're constantly having to be able to adapt to new workplaces, new work styles, and new work streams. So let's dig a little bit into this research that we've just recently undertaken. And I guess in answer to, the big question, which was positioned at the start, pardon me, I have got a cold, which is around what will schooling look like. Our research has been very clear. Education is one of the growth occupations. It's one of the areas least at risk of automation because of its very relational and creative nature. We know as teachers and school leaders, our work is complicated, and our work is sometimes ambiguous and vague, and sometimes there are wicked complicated problems that have to be solved creatively. These are the functions of humans. Education as a profession is predicted to grow and predicted to be least at risk of automation, although the nature of the work itself will change. Schools, as we know, are places where societies are created and recreated. So we just think about that. Schools are places where societies are created and recreated. They're not just places to go to have information imparted. Schools are more like learning communities than institutions, And a principal I was visiting in Finland said to me last year, our schools should not look like hospitals. And as we know too, schools and education systems are symbols of flourishing communities, symbols of flourishing societies and flourishing economies. So across the globe, we certainly see investments in schooling and schools and teachers and teacher training in order to be successful in navigating the knowledge economy. People realise that their greatest natural resource are the youth themselves. We also see across the globe this shift, if you like, from schools and classrooms as places of storage to schools and classrooms and learning environments are places where learning is served. So this shift, if you like, from teachers and teaching to learners and learning. But let's dig into the research a little bit. So in understanding the class of 2030, we engaged in an analysis of research across the globe, World Economic Forum, the PISA results, material published by Pearson's, McKinsey and Company, OECD. So we had a look at what people were saying was important for young people as they move through the education systems. We also asked the students themselves, 2,000 students from Singapore, from the US, UK, and from Canada as a sample group. We have had some other countries, the UAE, the United Arab Emirates, have taken the surveys and have run them with 1,000 of their students and 1,000 of their teachers to see whether they think the same. We also interviewed 70 global thought leaders, academics, venture capitalists, influencers in the education space to gather their thoughts around this topic too. So let's have a look at some of the big findings, if you like. The number one finding that came out was that social and emotional learning, which has always been important, will become critical for young people to develop as they progress through schooling. The future of learning and work will place a high premium on the ability of young people to be able to self-manage, to self-regulate, to make ethical decisions, to collaborate, to work with others. And this comes through the research over and over again. We hear this term which is called that learning will become socially embedded. How we interact matters. So these have been one of the interesting findings. Some data points around that. Social and emotional skills are twice as predictive as for student achievement than a postcode or a home environment. And that particularly refers to students' ability to predict their success, going back to what I said before. So this is around self-awareness of skills and abilities, myself as a learner. The students surveyed, in our 2,000 students that we surveyed, interestingly, half of them prioritised at least 2 social and emotional skills in the top 5 priorities for their own education. So the students themselves see these as being critical for their success in schooling and beyond. Teachers see social and emotional skills as important, but they struggle at times to find the time to be able to do the kinds of things that they feel they should be doing. Between 30 and 40% of the growth work in the future relative to today will require these social and emotional skills. These are the jobs that are not at risk of automation because they require our very humanness. And the last one, in this huge study done in the UK over decades, social and emotional skills were shown to have positive impacts on life outcomes up to 18 years later after being introduced in primary or junior primary school. So lower levels of crime, higher levels of civic engagement, increased learning outcomes.